Fellas, we are back with issue 26 of Transformers from Kirkman and Mora, and this one is a good one overall. But let's go ahead and jump straight into it. So this picks up with Thundercracker firing at Jazz and Wheeljack, with Thundercracker demanding where the Ark sent them, which we know it was Cobra Law, and we see Thundercracker say Skywarp's power is corrupted and that they were sent to the darkest corner of the planet and have no idea the horrors they saw. And we see Thundercracker tweaking out even more, saying he has to free Skywarp from Teletran 1 before he malfunctions again, and screams out death to the Autobots, which we see on the next page. Thundercracker lifts up Wheeljack and tosses him over, and Thundercracker reaches over to Skywarp, which Skywarp tells Thundercracker that removal means death for him, and Thundercracker, being in complete denial, says he knows the Decepticons can rebuild him, which Wheeljack says no, that is impossible, and that Teletran 1 is the only thing keeping his spark intact. Which we see Wheeljack and Jazz go and take on Thundercracker all at once, one going high and the other going low, except it doesn't work like at all for them, as Thundercracker makes easy work of them. But right before Thundercracker is about to put in the final blow, the city commander comes in on the next page, knocking Thundercracker down, saying hasn't their kind caused enough destruction, and grabs Thundercracker's shoulder cannons and breaks them off. Which we see Magnus ask Thundercracker that has he had enough, which Thundercracker says he will never quit, while his brother is in agony, which Wheeljack tells him the agony that was caused by his so-called Decepticon brothers, which Thundercracker knows of this, but says the Autobots have done nothing to undo his torture, which Wheeljack says that isn't true, and that Starscream did all of this and that they don't have the resources to undo it, otherwise they would have already. And Thundercracker screams out lies, which someone off panel says he speaks the truth, and that someone is Optimus Prime. And he tells Thundercracker the whole truth, telling him that it was not their doing and it was all the Decepticons who plotted this, which Thundercracker at first denies this, saying impossible, but the more Optimus speaks, saying it wasn't them, and telling Thundercracker that he himself knows how the Decepticons operate and how the Autobots operate, and that this isn't something that the Autobots would do. And Optimus goes on to give Thundercracker a deal that if his true goal is to restore Skywarp to how he was, then surrender for the time being, and that with new resources they got, which we saw last issue from General Flag, can be enough to restore Skywarp to how he was, which is exactly what we see as we go to the next page of Ultra Magnus asking Optimus if this is wise or not, which Optimus says he cares for his brethren just as we do, and how they can never hope to end this war if we cannot find a common ground. And of course, we see on the same page, we see General Flag complimenting Optimus on the dialogue and say, wow, well, great resolution, which I just think is hilarious. And we see Wheeljack ask if he's allowed to be here, and Optimus says General Flag is an ally, which I don't know, man, about all that. But General Flag will be providing them resources and as well as other gifts, which Wheeljack says like what, which we didn't see on the next page, is Mirage and Bulkhead. And I love how Wheeljack just throws his thumbs up and says, you know what, man, we're good. There's no problem at all. We're good, man. No issues here. And I love how Wheeljack offers to rebuild Chicago after the big climax in Volume 4. And we see General Flag agrees and says he would love to see that. But we see Magnus tell Optimus that he doesn't like that Thundercracker is wandering around and that he should be put with Soundwave, which Optimus says, and smartly so, says if you treat him like a prisoner, he will think like one, but treat him like an ally and he might just surprise us. And yep, I am loving the dialogue between Optimus and Magnus. Well done, Kirkman. But as we go to the next page, we see Wheeljack say that he may have just enough components to get Teletran 1 back into full working order, and once he's done with that, he can fully heal Optimus, which Optimus, being Optimus Prime, tells Wheeljack that he isn't the priority and that none of us are worse off than Skywarp, and that he should be first, which Thundercracker offers that he can donate any parts of himself to help Skywarp. And we see Magnus kind of not happy that Optimus is doing this, and that's only because he doesn't trust Thundercracker. Even more so as when they leave Wheeljack to fix Teletran, Magnus tells Thundercracker to move along and give Wheeljack some space. But we go to the next page and we see Optimus offer Soundwave some Energon, which Soundwave says actions appreciated but motive questionable, which Optimus Prime says he knows how little Energon everyone has due to being on Earth and just trying to pay in kindness, which Soundwave says Autobots inferior and Decepticons superior, which Optimus claps back at Soundwave saying you seem awful loyal to a group who abandoned you and left you for dead at your lowest moment, which is admirable but foolish, which is just crazy. And Soundwave just laughs at Optimus and we just see Optimus walk away saying enjoy the Energon. And we shift over to Chicago, and cool to know that this is where Carly and the others have been this entire time, as they are still helping people in Chicago and looking for survivors after the climax of Volume 4. And I love that it's Shredhead helping Carly out here, and we also see Beachcomber lifting up a piece of rubble, which then Shredhead comes in and helps. and it's just really cool. And we see them rescuing everyone, and we see Spike also return in the story, which we see Carly ask Spike how he's doing, which he says he's hanging in there. And after everything they've been through, it's wild to think that some have it worse than them, which we see Carly hug Spike, and Spike says they are strong and are going to get through this, which Carly says he sounds exactly like Optimus Prime, which is pretty high praise, at least in my opinion it is. And yes, RC is here as well, as so is Trailbreaker and the other aerial bots. So that's really cool to see that most of the Autobots are still in Chicago. It's not just, you know, half and half. It actually more is like a 80% split of 20% of the Autobots are on the Ark and the other 80% are still helping out in Chicago. It's really cool. And we see this nice little dialogue with RC welcoming Shredhead to the team, which Shredhead thanks RC and that it means a lot coming from a warrior like her. But this is where things start to go off the rails, fellas. Okay, so we shift to Shadow Watch and we see Miles Mayhem and some other scientists show that they have a 1-to-1 render of Optimus Prime in his vehicle mode and how the conversion works. It's a literal 1-to-1 render of Optimus Prime, which Miles Mayhem asks if General Flag knows about this render, and the scientist says no, he doesn't yet, but he can. But before he even finishes the sentence, Miles Mayhem says the fewer the better and shoots the scientist right in the face, which is insane. And as to what Miles Mayhem is planning, I will theorize about it at the end of this video, but I think it's a cool theory. But we switch over to Cybertron with Alita's group, and oh boy. Okay, so we see Cliffjumper and Alita going back and forth as Alita tells Cliff that despite his betrayal, it has long been known that he is known as one of the bravest of the Autobots, and as for why he should go and do what Alita's asking him to do is because it's to simply redeem himself. And what we learn to find out is that Alita is sending Cliffjumper basically on a suicide mission. He's going to deep on Decepticon territory on Cybertron to get missing components to reactivate the space bridge. It's a one-way trip. Cliffjumper knows that, Alita knows that, so that's why you see Cliffjumper fighting back on that. But Cliff's like, I'll do it, but not to redeem myself, but so that way when they do fix the space bridge and he somehow comes back alive, they can go to Earth and Optimus can knock some sense into Alita. And Alita questions this so-called sense that Cliffjumper's talking about, reminding Cliff that they are desperate because of Optimus Prime. And we see an injured Moonracer, he who shall not be named, Cosmos, Perceptor, and Cup, who is somehow still functioning. But I think it's really cool that Cup is actually still here. So there you go, guys. Cup's not dead. So you guys can stop being mad about Cup being dead. But that's all we really get for this side of the story. As the ending pages here, I feel like people will be pretty divisive, in my opinion. Maybe not, because we've been knowing, like, this has been leading to this part for quite some time. But anyways, we shift back to the Ark and we see that Skywarp is fully back online. But Wheeljack says he doesn't know if he remembers anything from his time as Teletran 1. And they refuse together. But we see Optimus telling Skywarp that it might be alarming seeing them, but they mean no harm. And although that may be true, we see that Skywarp, being a Decepticon, starts blasting and shooting at everyone, aiming for Optimus first. And we see Wheeljack trying to protect Teletran 1, and we see Magnus jumping in, trying to stop Skywarp, saying he was afraid of this happening. And we see Thundercracker trying to stop Skywarp, but Ultra Magnus says he can't be reasoned with and to step aside. Which we then see Skywarp transform and flies out of the area from Magnus's blast, and we see Magnus grab Skywarp and literally just throws him across the Ark, which is badass, dude. And we see Skywarp land where Soundwave was at in his prison cell, and Soundwave tells him to escape and get to Megatron because Megatron will know what to do. And we see Thundercracker tell Skywarp to stop and to at least hear him out on everything that has happened, which Skywarp calls Thundercracker a traitor because he stands among the Autobots, which Thundercracker asks, was he not betrayed when Soundwave and Starscream tore him apart and fused him together with Teletran 1? Which is a good point. And Skywarp says they were desperate at the time, but now since Megatron is back, all will be back to normal and they'll be back to glory and blah, 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 whatever Decepticon propaganda. But we see, and we see Skywarp getting punched by Thundercracker yelling out no, which of course Thundercracker tells Skywarp that he always knew he was the weak one out of all of them and that he won't be missed. And the Decepticons don't need him, which Skywarp jets out of the Ark, leaving Thundercracker behind. And when Magnus asks, what about Thundercracker? Thundercracker says you don't have to fear him as he's right where he belongs and he's chosen the right side. Which is just insane as Thundercracker is now an Autobot. Like, he's technically an Autobot, which is just crazy for me to think about. Remember, to anyone else who's read IDW and any other comic stuff, I'm not used to this storyline. So, like, to me, this is pretty bonkers to me. I'm not gonna lie. So it's cool to know that Thundercracker is an Autobot, at least right now. And before this issue wraps up, we go to the Nemesis with Megatron and the Decepticons, and we see Scavenger and Rumble arrive with very little amounts of Energon, which is barely enough for Megatron's repair, let alone for any of the other Decepticons, which when Scavenger arranges a plan to get more Energon from the humans, we see Megatron scream out in pain as his eyes turn purple, and that's how this issue ends. And wow, that was a long issue, and I know I talked very fast, but that's because there was a lot of stuff going on in this issue. But I liked it. I enjoyed it. I liked it a lot more than issue 25, in my opinion. I still think there's growing pains with the dialogue and writing in this story, but I enjoyed this a lot more than issue 25, just because I think issue 25 had a lot to cover. And also, I really am liking how we're kind of like flipped around now. That the Decepticons have very low Energon, but the Autobots have enough Energon to apparently fix Skywarp. Gonna bring Bulkhead and Mirage back online. Maybe some other Autobots we don't know yet. Yeah, I like it. I like how now the Autobots have the upper hand. It's pretty cool. I will tip my hat to Kirkman for that. And good to know that Miles Mayhem is a bad guy. I know you guys were saying in the comments, you know, he's a bad guy, the whole mask thing. General Flag is weird because I don't know if he is bad or not. I mean, the way Miles Mayhem was talking about it, maybe Flag is being duped as well. And as far as what the one-to-one rendering of Optimus Prime being used for, I think we're gonna go down the path of a Nemesis Prime. That's been done in many other universes and continuities where, you know, there's a Nemesis Prime that's either controlled by Megatron or a Herald of Unicron, or sometimes it's man-made. We saw that with Transformers Prime. I know he wasn't called Nemesis Prime, but we're going to get some type of, you know, evil clone of Optimus Prime. At least that's what I think. And I'm on board for that because I love me an evil Optimus Prime. But I would love to know your guys' thoughts on this issue. Let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments below, and leave a like and sub if you're new. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Hopefully infiltrating a new storyline. I think that's a big hint to what we're doing next. But yeah, later.